Okay, so you're here because you want to get to the heart of something, right? Understand it quickly, thoroughly, without getting totally lost in the details.
Exactly. That's the plan.
Good. Because today, we're doing just that. We're taking a deep dive into the artist Bob Camblin.
Hmm.
We're really focusing in on one particular year for him, 1967, which seems like it was, well, pretty important.
It really does seem that way. And we've got some great material to work with. A really detailed look at his activities in 67, his exhibitions, a big career move,
Mm.
and then also this other fascinating collection of his own thoughts, quotes and reflections on art, life, all sorts of things from around that time, late 60s, early 70s.
Okay, so the mission here is pretty clear. Pull out the
Yeah.
key stuff. What is Camblin actually doing with his art in 67? And what big ideas were sort of bubbling up and shaping how he saw things? And probably shaping the art itself.
That's the goal. Where should we start? The exhibitions?
Yeah, let's start there. Looking at 1967, I mean, the first thing that jumps out is just how busy he was showing his work. It looks like, what, 8 exhibitions mentioned for that year?
At least 8, yeah. That's a lot. It really suggests he was actively getting his work seen, very driven.
Absolutely. And it kicked off right at the start of the year, January, February, with a solo show.
Well,
Camblin, recent drawings at the Fred Jones Jr. Museum, University of Oklahoma.
right, 27 drawings in that one. And the museums seem to think highly of him. They mention his sensitive certainty of line.
Yeah, and intensely personal vision. Those phrases kind of stick with you. And some of the titles they listed, Bambola Morte's Tag 4, Death of Odysseus, gives you a flavor.
Definitely hints at some deeper themes. And he
Uh,
wasn't exactly unknown then either. He'd had that Fulbright grant just the year before, 1966, and won a purchase prize there too, so people were noticing him.
right. But what's interesting, just looking a bit further into 67, is he wasn't just drawing.
No, not at all. Just a month or so later, March, he's in the Intermountain Biennial out in Salt Lake City. And what's he showing there?
A sculpture called Head and a mixed media piece, Dollbox #2.
Exactly. So already showing range. And the reviewer for that show even pointed out the strength of sculpture that year and used Camblin's head as an example of versatility.
Versatility, yeah.
Yeah.
So drawings, sculpture, mixed media. Then May, another group show, this one focused on small sculpture and drawing up in Washington State.
Keeps going. July, he's in a drawing show down in Florida, St. Armand's Gallery.
And the director there, Murray Lebvol, had a really interesting description. He said Camblin's drawings were very carefully executed and dealt with the allegorical exploration of the meaning of life and death.
That phrase again, allegorical exploration, it really makes you think about what was going on beneath the surface of those images. Life and death. Heavy themes.
Definitely. And it didn't stop there. Later in the year, November, December, he's in Dallas for the Southwestern Prints and Drawings exhibition, another key venue.
Mm-hmm. Plus there were mentors of other shows, Beaumont, Texas, Dickinson, North Dakota, Norfolk, Virginia, though we don't have the exact dates for those. But still, it paints this picture of an artist just constantly exhibiting across the country, really.
It really does. But 67 wasn't just about shows. There was this other huge thing happening for him that summer.
Ah, yes, the move to Rice University.
Yeah. He took a position as assistant professor in Houston.
Hmm.
And reading about it, it doesn't sound like just any academic job. It feels like a very deliberate move on his part.
It seems so. He apparently talked about wanting to get away from conservative environments, and his view of Houston back then in the late 60s was pretty striking. No past history, lots of money, and open doors.
Wow. That's quite a statement. It really captures a certain moment, doesn't it? Wanting that sense of openness, maybe, especially with everything changing culturally back then.
Exactly. And Rice's art department was pretty new itself, only running for about 2 years. John O'Neill, who'd also come from Oklahoma, had basically set it up.
And Camblin joined some interesting artists there, like Earl Staley, David Parsons.
Yeah, and there's that anecdote about Camblin and Staley sharing studio space in this place called Allen Center. Apparently, it caused a bit of a stir because they were these, quote, non-traditional artists mixing with the business types.
You can almost picture it, the mixed crowd on the elevators,
Yeah.
like Sandy Havens mentioned. Gives you a feel for the energy, maybe some friction, too.
Definitely. And the connections between these artists run deep. Earl Staley had this funny quote about John O'Neill hiring people he didn't like right away, and apparently that included both Camblin and Staley himself.
Huh, that's great. But despite that, they clearly clicked artistically.
Oh, absolutely. They ended up sharing studios off campus later on, first off Montrose, then near St. Thomas University with Joe Tate. And Staley said something really remarkable.
What was that?
He said, Camblin actually taught me how to paint.
Wow. coming from another artist, that says a lot about Camblin's skill and maybe his influence.
Right. It really does. It suggests that beneath the maybe more conceptual or allegorical stuff, there was this really strong technical foundation.
Makes sense. And there was another interesting connection there, too, with Roy Fridge.
Right. Fridge was doing guest lectures. He taught animation in one of Camblin's drawing classes, actually, and he made a film, Reflections of Saint Bambola, which he said was influenced by Camblin. It even won an award a few years later.
So it's this whole network of creative exchange happening. What a year, loads of exhibitions, this big move, new colleagues, new influences.
Yeah, a real whirlwind. And this is where looking at his own words from around that time becomes so valuable. It helps us connect the outer activity with the inner landscape, you know?
Exactly. That collection of quotes and reflections, roughly 66 to 74, it really opens a window. Certain themes just keep popping up.
They really do. What stands out most to you?
Well, definitely his awareness of time passing, change. You see it in small ways, like noticing missing trees, but then there are these much deeper thoughts. That bit from Salt Air Summer 1967 is quite powerful.
Which part is that?
About how a memory can seem so vivid, but then reality, decay hits you, and that shared feeling of aging all happening in a moment. It feels very existential.
Mm-hmm. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Could those themes of life and death, the allegorical stuff mentioned about his drawings, be coming directly from these kinds of reflections on time and mortality?
It seems very likely.
Yeah.
And related to that maybe is this constant search for understanding, this openness to different ways of knowing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like that quote, look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need.
Right. It suggests he wasn't drawing hard lines between science and, well, something else. He wanted that perfectly average view, as he put it, to appreciate both. And he seems certain about intuition, the sixth sense.
That kind of thinking, that refusal to be boxed in, could absolutely fuel the more symbolic, maybe mysterious parts of his art we were talking about.
For sure. And his connection with nature feels really central, too.
It does. Things like, find something in nature that completes you and then surrender. Or, the cosmos waves at me with tree leaves. It's very poetic.
And that haiku about the fish trapped by the tides. So much like us. There's a sense of connection, but also maybe fragility, being caught in forces bigger than ourselves.
That's beautifully put. And that image, the trapped fish, you could easily see that becoming a visual motif in his work. It's so evocative.
Mm-hmm. Then there's his thoughts specifically about art itself. I was struck by him saying art is not just images, and how art for art's sake had become something else for him.
Yes, art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake. That's a pretty profound shift, isn't it? Away from formalism towards something deeply personally necessary. Survival's sake.
Wow.
Yeah.
And his ideas about how to create art are fascinating, too. Step off the train of thought.
When you think, don't act. When you act, don't think. It's all about intuition, right? Letting go. That Zen mind.
Exactly. Which could connect back to that sensitive certainty of line, couldn't it? Maybe it came from a place of acting without overthinking, that kind of instinctual mark-making.
It could very well. It suggests confidence, but maybe a confidence born from trusting intuition rather than just rigid control.
And his view of the artist's role. The artist today is the only free agent. That's a bold claim.
It is. And that idea of an ecology of art, that artists might be sort of unconsciously fighting for balance in a world that's gone very wrong, it gives art this almost vital corrective function.
It really elevates it beyond just self-expression. It makes you wonder how much he consciously felt that weight or responsibility while he was working back in '67.
It's impossible to know for sure, but these quotes suggest it was definitely part of his thinking, and then his comments on truth and communication.
Yeah, like when understood, all truth is funny. And admitting how hard it is to really transfer feeling through language.
Which might be why he leaned into allegory, perhaps. Trying to communicate on a different level, bypass the limits of words to hit something more visceral or symbolic.
That makes a lot of sense. Allegory speaks in images and feelings, not just definitions.
And even his quick take on starting at Rice. The first year, I assumed. The second year, I capitulated. The third year, I'm teaching. It shows a bit of his personality, doesn't it? That wry humor dealing with the adjustment.
Absolutely. And you can't forget that incredible line about the ego.
Oh, the goldfish one.
Yes, your ego hidden and following you as gracefully as a goldfish's shit. I mean, that's just brilliantly blunt and self-aware.
It really is. Shows a sharp eye and, yeah, a lack of pretension maybe. He wasn't afraid to be critical, even of himself or of the art world.
No, he definitely had thoughts on the art world. Talking about consumer art, and how things were shifting from contemplation towards just shock or quick recognition.
Right. That tension between concept and traditional standards seemed to be on his mind, and his desire to make something truly unique in its intimacy, but also solid enough that people couldn't just glance past it. That really captures the challenge, I think.
It does, and this hologram idea.
Ah, yes, interconnectedness. Moving beyond the shadows on the cave wall, as he put it. Seeking a more whole view of reality.
You can see how that could feed into complex, layered artwork. And his focus on balance, too. Resist and submit held in perfect balance. The yin and yang mandala idea.
That fascination with duality, finding equilibrium between opposites, it feels very central to a lot of his thinking, and maybe even to his process resisting and submitting to the creative impulse.
And finally, embracing mistakes. There are no mistakes. Mistakes are nature's way of telling you to trust your instincts. That feels very freeing creatively.
Absolutely. It all weaves together, doesn't it? These deep thoughts about time, reality, nature, the self, the art world, they must have been swirling around as he was making all that work in 1967.
For sure. When you hear that gallery director talking about the allegorical exploration of the meaning of life and death in his drawings.
It connects directly back to these quotes about mortality, magic, nature, survival. You can see how the philosophical inquiry found its way into the visual. Even those titles, Death of Odysseus, St. Bambola, they hint at narratives wrestling with these big ideas.
So, wrapping this up, 1967 clearly emerges as this incredibly dense, significant year for Bob Camblin.
No doubt he was intensely active, exhibiting drawings, sculpture, mixed media, really getting his work out there nationally, and at the same time making that pivotal move to Rice, immersing himself in a new, stimulating environment.
And when you layer his own words, his reflections from around that time onto that activity, you get a much richer picture. He wasn't just doing things, he was thinking deeply.
Very deeply about time, perception, why make art at all, our place in the cosmos. These fundamental questions were fueling that intensely personal vision people saw in his work.
It really highlights that push and pull for any artist, maybe for anyone trying to create something meaningful, balancing your own inner world, your ideas with the world outside, the trends, the demands, the environment.
Yeah, his thoughts on navigating that, on trying to communicate something intimate yet resonant in a changing world,
Yeah.
they still feel incredibly relevant, actually.
They really do. It kind of leaves you thinking, doesn't it? For any of us trying to learn or understand things, how do we strike that balance? How do we hold on to our own perspective while still engaging with all the currents swirling around us? Definitely something to chew on.